I wanted to say a big thank you to our sponsor, Talent Insights. Talent Insights are Australia's leading data specialist recruitment business. They are experts in recruitment strategy and delivery for analytics and data teams. They are the go-to recruitment business for all your data roles in Australia, and they can help both with permanent hires and short-term project-focused data resources. I've used Talent Insights in the past, and I've always found them fantastic to work with. Visit them at talentinsights.com.au. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining another episode of Data Futurology. In Data Futurology, we discuss the challenges and tips from executives in the data science, machine learning, and AI space from around the world. We want to bring you different perspectives to the problems that are being faced, and to help you gather more knowledge and more information about how to get more value from your analytics and AI initiatives. Generally, we focus on non-technical concepts, and that's because we feel at Data Futurology, we feel that most of the content and most of the learning that you can do about data science is focused on the technical part. So you can get from online content, online resources, universities, etc. You can get really good at the coding, at the maths, the algorithms, etc. But there is not much content for leadership and strategy and how to become a more impactful leader and lead great initiatives within an organization. So that's what we cover in Data Futurology. And today we're going to be speaking about the world of retail, AI, and what the future holds. Before we jump in, I have to say thank you to our sponsor, which is Talent Insights. Talent Insights has been supporting us for a long time, so show them some love whenever you can. They are great, and they help us to bring this content to the community for free, which is fantastic. I'll introduce our guest today, which is Aaron Pratt. He's the analytics and AI lead for Country Road Group, which has a huge, broad remit across multiple different brands, which Aaron will tell us about. But mate, thank you so much for being on the show. How are you feeling today?
Yeah, not too bad. Good morning to everyone. It's certainly a different sort of Friday morning than I'm used to, but yeah, can't complain too much. It's always good to see the weather sort of shining out a bit as well, which is a bit different to what we've been having lately in Melbourne anyway. So. Good man.
And I put a comment before asking where people are joining from, and we have some people from the US, people from Melbourne, from Sydney as well. So really diverse group. So Aaron, mate, can you start by telling us about your role and your remit and the focus areas, and a bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So my name's Aaron Pratt. As Philippe said, I'm the AI and Advanced Analytics Manager at Country Road Group. For those who don't know Country Road Group, there's, as Philippe also said, there's a number of brands that sort of sit under that umbrella. There's Country Road, Trinity, Witchery, Mimco, Politics, and then there's also, almost kept as a separate business, is David Jones. There's a lot sort of going on amongst all those different brands. But essentially, my role is to really sort of lead effectively the data science of the organization. My team and I, we sit down and we try to sort of liaise with all the different business units to understand like what data science applications can we build for them that will make their lives a whole lot easier.
Awesome. And great to see that. I'm sure that there's very interesting challenges about the breadth of having different brands and, some benefits of centralization. So before we jump into that, tell us how did you get to where you are today?
Yeah, that's a long story. How long have we got? Essentially, when I first started out of uni, I went pretty much launched straight into a game design career. So I'm not sure if many people know, but there's here in Australia, there's like the one sort of key slot machine company or pokies called Aristocrat. And I was, effectively doing the game design for those machines. Most people, when they think about game design, think, it's just you guys just get to play games all day and you get paid to play games. That may be true. But what, like in terms of the maths that sort of sit behind, particularly in sort of like gambling scenarios, the idea is that you're trying to sort of make the game and the game mechanics as fun for the player, because like there's no sort of lie that you are on average going to lose your money, but it's about sort of putting the mechanics that make the game fun. So that's sort of where I started, doing all sorts of like crazy creative math models in that space, which was very fun. Then the GFC hit, and at the time, our studio was based in Melbourne. The parent company was based in Sydney, and like we were considered I think a geographical expense, and so pretty much the entire studio got given the axe. And so like me being sort of a few years into the job, like I was sort of completely blown away by like what am I going to do next? And so from there I sort of jumped over to the other side of the fence, and I was working at Crown for a little bit. So instead of creating the games, you're implementing the games in the venues. Very different remit. But before long, I sort of made my way back into more research-based roles. So I went into market research for a bit, found a job at a company called Forethought, which again is based here in Melbourne. They're a market research agency, and I really got a lot of exposure to a real breadth of different industries. So everything from aviation to retail to pharmaceutical companies, through to like so many different areas, purely trying to find out, I guess, like the psychology that sits behind consumer decisions for those different companies. And that's sort of where I really started to sort of use a lot of the different sort of AI machine learning stuff that I use today. From there, I jumped over to another company called Lewis Research, which again was in the market research industry. But then eventually I sort of made my way to 7-Eleven here in Australia. So at 7-Eleven, I was like, at the time, I was their only data scientist. I was sort of their very first little foray into data science. And like what that role really allowed me to do was to be able to sort of play around with all that creative thinking that I'd sort of learned along the way through game design, but implement it in a much more structured retail and business. Like the stuff that I was working on was like trying to understand like Slurpee weather predictions. Nice. So depending on like what the temperature was on a given day, I could very accurately tell you how many Slurpees we'd sell at different stalls around the nation.
That's great.
Which is obviously like it's lots of fun to talk about, but it actually has like real world applications, because from a supply chain point of view, like you can actually inform based on the forecast, like how much supply you're going to need for products to get out there. And so apart from just that one key example, there was like probably the biggest piece of work I did at 7-Eleven was around their facial recognition software. Mm-hmm. In my time there, I'm not sure how known it is to the audience, but there was some media that sort of hit the airwaves around underpayment of staff. And so what we as the head office were trying to understand and try to sort of mitigate was to make sure that all the employees within the different franchises were protected from that scandal. Mm-hmm. And so we implemented a facial recognition solution that instead of facing customers or trying to understand, okay, which customers are coming in, we were facing it the other way to the staff as a way to effectively, and what I ended up doing was creating like a facial time carding system. Mm-hmm. And so using my stuff that I built out, we ended up sort of cross-checking that back to the core time carding system, and any anomalies that came up would cause a red flag, and we'd start a big investigation off the back of it.
That's awesome.
And then eventually I've from there made my way to Country Road, where I'm doing the stuff that I'm doing today.
Man, that is great. That is awesome. And also you went from being a data scientist. Well, in 7-Eleven, you were the first data scientist. I assume then the team grew from there, and now you are leading the team and the initiative across a number of brands. How was the switch over for you before we jump into the applications there?
Yeah, it was like, it's a good question. Like, it wasn't that hard. Like, I wouldn't say that it was hard, but it was certainly different. Like, so, and even now, like the real change is about sort of, instead of being the person on the tools doing all the sort of the coding and everything around actually getting the numbers out, you're now in the process of delegating that to the team and managing, I guess, the breadth of queries that are coming in, dispersing it across the team, and sort of being the conduit to the business as well.
Yeah, great, really good. And tell us how's the last almost 2 years in the role been? What's been your journey like?
Yeah, I mean, well, yeah, not gonna lie, COVID sort of did have a little bit of a say in that. But yeah, it's certainly been very interesting. Lots of learning along the way. Like, probably the really big thing for me was when I came into the position. You sort of have this expectation that like business like Country Road Group would have all of its data in check, would have all the right systems in place, and that's very rarely the case. So when you come in, like the very first 3 to 6 months is really just sort of establishing, okay, what is the core platform that we're going to be utilizing? What are we going to build out to sort of make our sort of daily bread worth of work? So there was that sort of component. But yeah, as you say, like the journey is really about sort of expanding the knowledge base and the applicability to the business for all the different applications that you're building.
Awesome. And where did you decide to start the applications in?
So as in like the software vendor or the
just the area of application.
Yeah, there was a few. So like for us, like the real key thing that I was really interested in coming in was to understand like what is the cross shop, like what does that behavior look like for our different customer groups? So to understand, okay, well, which customers who shop at Country Road are also shopping at David Jones? Like, what do they look like? Like, what are they purchasing? What makes them different to other customer groups? So that was, like prior to me coming in, that was something that they really hadn't even had the ability to do. So just understanding that sort of first behavior around what those customers are doing, that was probably the very first thing. Then from there, we started to move into more sort of, like, as I said, those data science use cases. So yeah, we actually had an initiative around probably this time last year where we liaised with AWS themselves to sort of build out what we called a phase 2 initiative. So it was all around if we were to put down top 5 key things that the business wanted to do, let's try and smash this out in a sort of a short sprint worth of work, and sort of showcase that back to the business. So that included sentiment analysis. So that was one of the key things that we built out. There was some other sort of dashboarding requirements. Another really key thing that they were interested in at the time was around something called churn mitigation. So
called what, sorry?
Churn mitigation.
Yep.
So like understanding, okay, which customers at this very time are likely to churn. And so you're sort of building out this probabilistic model to say, okay, this person is X% likely to churn at this point in time. And then you can use that information to actually activate marketing campaigns off the back of it. So if a person is likely to churn at a specific point in time, you can like activate in the background and autonomously this piece of marketing.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. That's really great applications, and definitely it ties into some of the poll questions that we have. So I might close the poll and we can have a look at the answers and take it from there. So we have over 75% of people responded to the poll, and I'm sharing the results now. So everyone should be able to see them. First question is, have you used sentiment analysis in your organization? Straight down the middle, 50-50 between yes and no. So can you tell us a little bit about maybe start with what is sentiment analysis for the people that don't know, and then tell us about how you've used it or implemented in at your work.
Yep, sure. So sentiment analysis is typically where you take unstructured data like text, or you could do voice to text, or basically some customer feedback, and you are putting around whatever sentiment is based in that unstructured data to make it a bit more structured. And so, for instance, what we did, so NPS is probably like one of the key things that we, amongst many other organisations, start to sort of dabble in to understand sort of customer sentiment. In that questionnaire, there's, I'm not sure if people have answered the question, but basically you say, from a scale from 0 to 10, how likely are you to recommend this organisation? And then usually a question after that is, well, why did you give that answer? Our first part that we wanted to really understand was, instead of having to do sort of manual analysis on a whole bunch of different text responses, is there any sort of key themes that were starting to bubble up in that text response? And so we built this engine that not only sort of identified the positive, neutral, and negative sort of spectrum to sentiment, but also was able to codify different categories that were inherent in those text responses. So, for instance, if a customer had a complaint about sizing, this engine basically was able to identify that there's a complaint here from a customer, and then B, it's also specifically around the sizing issue, or was it a quality issue, or was it a customer service issue? There's all these different things that it automatically picks up. The second part to that is to sort of, and we're still working on this, to be honest, but it's about really embedding that in the different systems around the business. So imagine if a customer calls up the service line saying, okay, I've got a problem, because we're all in the same ecosystem, so that our customer service telephony system is also based in AWS. We can capture that as a bit of a voice-to-text component, codify that part up, categorize that text, and actually do something with it in real time. So again, like if a customer has a complaint, we can actually capture that complaint. We can pipe that through to our other service ticketing system and actually have a live response to that in as efficient a way as possible.
That's fantastic, man. That is great. What were some of the challenges in the implementation?
Yeah, the reason why I sort of say that it's a bit of work in progress is also around just getting access to the different systems, as I sort of alluded to at the start. Because there's so many different brands and there's so many different sort of stakeholders around the business. Further to that, there's also a whole lot of different systems. And so trying to understand, okay, well, we need to pipe this data to this system, or we need to get access to that system, and then we're going to try and do this to this one. Oh, no, this one's blocked through this port. Okay, let's try some other sort of thing. So there is a whole lot of challenges from that point of view. It would be great if it just did what it was supposed to do from the start, but it's very rarely the case. So. That's
right. Yeah, really rarely the case. So the work at the moment is in terms of getting the insight that came out of the text after the NPS question, so you've tagged it, you've assigned it to an area, and now it's about getting it to that area in a way that can be resolved for the customer. Yeah.
So but there's other parts to that as well that we've implemented. So in terms of drivers for NPS, Traditionally, you would use the other questions in the survey to help infer like what's actually driving NPS at that time. When you start to dabble with the sentiment analysis, you've got this whole extra plethora of different variables that you can start to plug into a driver analysis. And so one thing that we're seeing automatically out of the model is that customer service, for instance, is by far the biggest driver for NPS. And we can actually start to use that information. So if we can see that people are most responsive or most impacted by customer service, then you need to operationalize that. Like you need to make sure that your customer service is spot on from the get-go. And then that has obvious impacts to bottom line. So
definitely. And so my assumption is that you're getting the NPS question mostly from the online experience, or is that captured offline as well?
So yes, for both. So our NPS system is there's a range of different things, but it's all about like if you transact with us through the different businesses, there's a system in the background that captures, okay, well, these customers purchased this at this time, and they sort of go into a pool of will they receive a questionnaire or not.
Nice, very nice. And have you looked into tying the responses to the staff that they dealt with?
Yeah. So that's so basically staff are actually, that's one of their KPIs for the year. So it's one of the easy ones to sort of just strategically put in place. But yeah, so staff NPS is all around. As I said, like that actually ties directly into their bonus. So what you can now do is also, depending on how much data you have, you can also start to build out a driver analysis for individual staff members if needed.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. And the teams as well. And if you have different compositions of teams and you have enough data, you can start to identify who is a high performer that positively affects the team performance versus otherwise. Super exciting, man. That's really great. Going back to the poll, the second question was around price optimization, which I know is another area that you guys have done really exciting work. So when we asked the audience, have you used price optimization in your organization? Most people said no. So 69% of people said no, and the rest, yes. So similar to the previous question, can we start with definition of price optimization, what it includes, and then let's jump into how you have used it at Country Road Group?
No worries. So definition for price optimization. Basically, if you're selling a product, the one thing that you can control is the price point that you sell it at. So if you're selling, say, a jumper or a t-shirt or like whatever you're selling, the price point directly is impacting the demand for that product. So if you think about, say, how many people drive a Lotus versus how many people drive a Honda, like that's driven by the price point. I mean, if we all had like $1 million just to splurge, we may all buy the Lotus, but that's very rarely the case. And so so as you start to vary the price point, the demand of a product basically will sharply decline. But in saying that, there is somewhere in the middle there where there's a sweet spot of that the right demand for that product versus the cost of the product gives you the optimal profit at that point. And so that's pretty much what we're playing at with price optimization. How we've implemented it at Country Road Group, and again, this is a big work in progress. But we have a piece of work that's underway at the moment that's all about sort of gathering as much sort of competitive price points as possible. Traditionally in retail, you would probably do this with either like passive shoppers or, so for instance, like when I was at 7-Eleven, like the marketing team would actually go out to like our competitors and just sort of browse and note down a few sort of price points and then come back, put that into a system to then try and analyze what the different price points are. The problem with that sort of process is it's all about human interaction. So you're going to end up with a whole lot of errors, with coding errors, with writing it down. And by the time you actually get that data back into the system, who's to say that the price point hasn't already changed? There's all those different factors that you need to take into consideration. And so, but these days, there's a much faster and more efficient way to do these sorts of things, particularly as we start to venture into the online world. And so you can actually create like a pricing scraper, which can go off and scrape a whole bunch of different websites to understand just automatically, like, what is the different price points that your competitors are selling certain products at. So that's certainly something that we're building at the moment. The way that we've also structured that as well is to sort of put an inherent hierarchy into the different SKUs to understand, okay, like, what's the like for like comparison to our business? Like, what if we were to look at the average price point for, say, clothing or menswear or womenswear or women's accessories, what does that correspond to from our competitive point of view? Now, the key component that you need to think about with this is that price differential, just because it's like, if you're selling it for more expensive, that doesn't mean that it's a bad thing. What can actually happen is that by shifting that dial even further, you may find that you end up with more profit. You may find that you actually sell more for some unknown reason. So the idea is that you're using these price differentials to then infer what your optimal price point is.
Yeah, that's awesome. And actually, before I ask you, I'll ask you about the drivers and or maybe the levers that you're optimizing on. But before I do that, we got a question through the Q&A from Ryan. Morning, mate. He says, great to see Country Road Group is investing in data science to improve customer experience with the brand. Question is, how much of an advantage do you feel this is giving you over the competition? And then he says, it seems to me that maybe many high street retailers are relying on black box AI/point solution and applications to deliver customer experience rather than a centralized view of the customer. Do you have any thoughts on that side?
Yeah, I mean, so completely agree with the black box solutions. I mean, the thing that always does my head in is, like, when I deal with the different stakeholders around business, from marketing through to our CRM team, they always have like their go-to solution for something. And I'm always challenging them, like, this was built with a specific thing in mind. That's not what our business is. And so we, like my team in particular, we always try to sort of challenge the status quo with that sort of thinking, to the point where we would predominantly build these sort of solutions in-house, because we know that this is exactly what is going to work for our systems and our customers ultimately. Yeah,
nice one. And how much of an advantage do you feel that this approach to implementing data science in retail is giving you guys?
Yeah, I mean, like, so the advantage, like, it's funny because a lot of these things, like, anybody with the skills can implement these things. The real advantage is sort of considering to where you were, and where we were was we had a lot of manual processes. And so the really big key component to this is that we've now enabled is to, like, really efficiently use our time and energy to better our customer experience.
Yeah, that's awesome. And from a process perspective, in terms of price optimization, you've got the scraping of prices, you've got the identifying similarities of products, and then when you go to the optimization part, what are the levers that you're optimizing on, and what are you shooting for?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, retail is, quite frankly, it's about making money, but making money by providing things to a consumer. And so probably the very first thing that we would try to optimize on is profit. And so profit it's really just a factor of the price point that you're selling it at, the volume that you're selling at that price point, and then the cost per product at that price point as well. And so as you start to play around with the price point, you can obviously see that you can start to optimize that profit equation. But in saying that, like, there may be times when volume is more is the key driver that you're trying to shift the dial on. And so you may want to sort of tweak price point by making it a little bit less profitable, but by increasing the volume. And that can obviously improve your market share. It can improve a whole bunch of other metrics that in turn, in the long run, will ultimately improve your profit.
Yeah, nice one. And are there any competitive advantages that you guys have as a group or as individual brands? Any competitive advantage that you can lean on to improve things compared to competitors? And maybe that's number of stores or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, like, so particularly through the previous sort of COVID period, stores and the number of stores that we had was certainly in question. And so one thing that we were considering was more around like, where do we position our stores nationally in order to sort of optimize our visibility to our customers, to our core customers, but also relative to each other, like what is the sort of the standpoint that we're trying to make the group as profitable as possible. And like, like, it sounds nice when you say it on the page, but inherently, like, the different brands are sometimes actually considered a competitor to each other. So if you think of, say, Witchery and Country Road, the women's wear that we have in Country Road, there was a period of time where Witchery were saying, "Oh, Country Road's stealing my customers," and it's like, well, hang on, they're all the same customer. Like, it's our customers, and so so it's really sort of about embedding a more group-wide thinking to the different analytics that you're putting in.
Nice one. That's a really good change that an AI and analytics team can bring into an organization, having that higher level perspective. That's awesome. And we have a question from Tony asking about seasonality and pricing. So he says, how much does seasonality affect and come into pricing as you optimize?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. So when we start to play around with price optimization, I think the key point to consider is that it's not something that's static. It's not something that you need to just change once a year and then you can do it. Like, it's something that you can change in real time, see what the demand is off the back of that, and then have the system adjust accordingly. But in saying that, so particularly in retail, like, Christmas is basically the one key period of the year where something like 50% of the entire year's selling is actually done within that 1 week before Christmas.
Wow. Yeah.
And so, being as that's such an important time of the year, obviously pricing is going to play a massive part in trying to drive your group-wide strategic targets from a profitability point of view. So there is a fair bit of seasonality that you do need to consider, and like, it is still possible to optimize around that, though.
Great, really good. And a question from Wayne is around inventory management. So the question is, have you applied AI/ML to buying, distributing, or redistribution of stock?
Yeah. So it's at the moment, it's not sort of as a live system. Like, there's a few sort of prototypes around the business that we're trying to sort of showcase that you can use these parts, like these different parts of AI and ML in. One thing we actually did recently was, and when I say recently, it was probably around 6 months ago now, but we worked with supply chain to understand from a dispatch point of view. So if you think of, like, when a customer comes online and they purchase something through our website, there's a whole bunch of processes that sort of determine where to choose the stock from. So the warehouse can only have so much stock available to it, and predominantly they're the sort of the most appropriate SKUs. And although it may be cheaper to fulfill from the warehouse, it may not be cheaper to actually send it from the warehouse if they don't have the stock to begin with, but also if stock is, say, closer to the customer. And so there's a big algorithm that sort of sits in the background that helps to decide where to pick the stock from. And so, so we sat down and we basically optimized that dispatch algorithm in order to make it as effective as possible while keeping sort of the cost components to a minimum.
Nice. That's really good. How much does demographics and the type of customers that go into the store and the surrounding demographics of the store, how much does that drive the inventory management?
Yeah, it's a good question again. So what we know from different stores is that different stores, particularly from their sort of as you say, their geographical profile, they have different needs to other stores. And so when you think about brick and mortar, there's typically a huge range review that goes through those different store environments to understand like what's the optimal range to fit into this store. When you think of that from an online perspective, online should basically have everything. And there's some cases, though, particularly in sort of a DJ's point of view, where our suppliers will only sort of, may only want certain products to be available at, say, our flagship stores. And so there is a whole sort of range between trying to understand like what's the optimal range to have in each stores from a data science perspective, but also what's the most like practical when it comes down to sort of vendor management.
Yeah, that's nice. That's really good to bring in the business needs that are, can be seen as constraints. Like you bring them in and help optimize within that playing field. That's really great. Question 3 in the poll was around time on tools. So it was how much time do you spend on the tools? And the majority of people said, or 35% people said less than 10%. And another 35% of people said between 40 and 60%. So it might be a split between management and the people doing the work. Other responses, it was between 10 and 40%, with 23% of people saying that, and then very few people on the 60% plus time on the tools. What are your thoughts about those answers, Aaron?
Yeah, I mean, and it's something that like I would love to have more time on the tools, because like that's like to me that's a whole lot of fun to actually be like right in the thick of like a key project and actually sort of building out all those different components in a seamless coding environment that just integrates nicely with everything. It's that brings me a lot of joy, and I wish I had more time for it. But when you start to manage a team and those number of queries that come into your team just scale up big time, what you like inherently have to find is that there's a trade-off between sort of managing the team and managing the amount of accountabilities that you and the team have, and the time of the tools. And so so for me these days, I'm probably in the less than 10%, which and that's not a bad thing. It's just like that's just the progression that you go on. But like ultimately, like if I was to say that the team's productivity because of that is far greater than if I was to be on the tools full time. So
yeah. That's nice. Yeah, I agree. And I'm the same. Yeah, definitely in the under 10% of time on the tools, and would love for that to be more. But sometimes or often as a leader, your time is better spent in helping other people be more productive or more effective in their work. And that's definitely time that you're not on the tools. And before we jump into question 4, we have a question from Emily, who says, online channels have been increasing in popularity, and obviously COVID did a big leap for that. She's asking, how have you seen that transition into more an online demand, or a world of more online demand, and whether there's been any use of AI in customer experience on the online channels?
So I'll answer the first one first then. So the demand for the online, and I'm sure, like as I said before, like when we went through COVID, I'm sure we weren't the only ones, but online just went absolutely through the roof. I think we absolutely smashed our target. So we were already sort of trending to a more online business. Like one of the things that we were certainly strategically thinking about is like, what is the role that brick and mortar plays in sort of this digitally accelerating economy. And so when you start to close your stores because of COVID restrictions, that digital economy just, like, that's the only way that people could actually shop with the different brands. And so we did have to accelerate a lot of different key aspects of the online retail journey. And so like it was just something that either you did or you didn't do, and if you didn't do it, then you're sort of left behind with sort of next best in class. So it's certainly a journey that the different brands went on.
Yeah, definitely the case. That makes sense. And have you had any uses of AI on customer experience on the online channels? Yeah,
so like probably the very first and easiest to implement is the whole sort of chatbot functionality. And one thing that we, again, due to our sort of embedding of AWS from that sort of standpoint, one thing that we basically put in place was a live chat system that allows our customer service to effectively see customers online as if that was its own store. And so like they actually have a portal where they're sort of moving around, going from sort of menswear to women's wear, and can see how many customers are browsing that department online. It's a very nice little system. I've forgotten the name of it, but it's well worth looking into. And what they can do is they can actually sort of tap the customer on the shoulder, and as they sort of come through, they can, like, that'll pop up on the customer side as a little sort of would you like any help with your purchase today? Sometimes you might actually think that that's a chatbot sort of sitting in the background, but it's actually a real customer service officer in the background. As we start to move that forward, though, you can obviously think, okay, well, what's the commonalities, or what's the common problems that these service agents are actually starting to address, and what can, say, a real chatbot sort of leverage in that area.
That's awesome, man. That's great. Use the humans to teach the machine, make those bits scalable, and leave the new ones, the new questions, new problems, new areas for humans. That's great. Yeah. We have a question from Dasa. It says, good to see you, Aaron. What is the best proportion of BI and AI in a retail business?
BI versus AI. I mean, like, ideally, BI is like that's your daily bread. Like that's what you should be sort of relying on for numbers each and every day. I think AI, it relies on the BI to be right most of the time. So if you're wanting to get AI really embedded correctly, you need to make sure that you have your BI like completely sorted out. But yeah, so in terms of, I guess, the proportionality, like, I mean, so BI itself, as I said, like that's daily sort of bread. AI is really about making things more efficient. I sort of liken it to, if you think of the BI as the police, the AI is that's a SWAT team. Like, you don't need it every day, but when you do need it, it can really get the job done.
Great analogy. Love it. Question 4 on the poll was, what would you like to see from retail in a post-COVID-19 world? And So we had options there as augmented reality, VR stores, smart mirrors, and then seamless experience between online and offline world. That last one was the most popular one. Any thoughts from your side?
Yeah, I mean, like so these are all things that we're considering. And so like I'll probably go from the least to the best here. So from a smart mirrors perspective, one thing that I and like my team in particular, like the things that we sort of start to dabble in are things that most of the business hasn't even thought of yet. So when we talk about smart mirrors, like what if we had in the dressing room, instead of having to go out and get new clothes to come into the dressing room, what if you could just go into the dressing room, tap a button, and you could automatically change what outfit you were wearing on the mirror itself.
Mm-hmm.
That's the sort of stuff that we're starting to think about, potentially implementing throughout different businesses. So that's sort of the smart mirror component. It's not something that we've done yet, but I think it's something that as we start to move down the AI accelerated journey, that's the sort of project that, from a customer point of view, it's all about making the customer's life as easy as possible. And so, like if you're going into a store and you can see that like one of the key problems that store is having is that change rooms or the amount of stock that people are going back and forth with is a bit of a problem. There's potential theft that's going on. You can start to mitigate that with the use of, say, a smart mirror.
Yeah, that's great.
In terms of, I was just going to say, in terms of VR stores, the next one. So again, if you think about the online journey, and there is actually some retailers who do this, particularly in Europe, they have effectively built like a virtual reality store for their online experience. And so the idea is that you can put on your headset, or you could even just go into your browser, and instead of just seeing like a standard sort of online experience, their experience is that they're actually sort of walking through a virtual store. And the idea is that it sort of speaks to the last one as well, where it's trying to create that seamless differentiation between an online versus an offline experience. Again, augmented reality. So if you like, augmented reality is a little bit of like, if you think about the smart mirrors, it's just about sort of overlaying something on top of reality. And so you can do the same thing with the smart mirror. You can do the same thing from inside games. So again, like what we've seen through our vendors. So there are certain vendors who say have put their online products available through, say, games like Fortnite. And so if you look at the likes of Nike and Gucci and other sort of really big name brands, they're selling things really expensively to the younger demographic on Fortnite to have a sort of a digital persona.
Wow.
That's the world we live in. So
makes me feel old.
Yeah. Don't you get started. So like I think in terms of like, it probably isn't any surprise that the last one here is the most popular, because that the differentiation between online and offline, particularly as we move to probably this digital accelerated world, you really need to have it like right in line with each other. If you have a different experience, customers themselves, from a psychology point of view, they're going to consider it as two different entities, to the point where they could even think of like the DJs online or some brand online versus a brand offline is actually two different brands in themselves. And the whole point that we're trying to work towards is to make that one seamless journey.
It's great. And we had a related question from Tony. He asks, how do you track individual customers from online to offline?
Yep. So, yeah, there's a little bit of smarts that go into that. The very first one is probably from a CRM point of view. So if they are a member, as you come into stores, you can scan your loyalty card, and we can basically track your offline sales with also your online sales at the same time. So that's all sort of linked to your sort of your digital membership. Where that's not the case, we do have access to like through our banking provider, we do have access to sort of like a hashed credit card. And that's something that retailers in general have the ability to pay for. And what that allows you to do is to see, okay, well, what's the like where have I seen this credit card, and what's the purchases that this credit card is then associated to. So without actually knowing who that person is, you can start to profile, okay, well, this credit card purchased this, and this is probably who they are. And then we can start to analyze, okay, well, this is the type of customer who's purchasing this. This is how many customers we have of that. What else would they like?
Right. Yep. That's excellent. We have a question from Caleb around measuring the customer experience in the store. And so particularly, he says, with omni-channel strategies, mainly focusing on the digital channels, why do you think more retailers are not using technologies like video analytics and RFID to get a deeper understanding of the customer in the physical store? And this is based on an assumption from him that says that the majority of transactions are made in a store. If that's the case, does it warrant more investment into understanding how the customer movements and kind of like what they interact with while they're in the store?
Yeah, I mean, so we certainly have that as well. I think the real sort of the thing that sort of sits behind that is that it's very expensive. And as you start to scale that up, particularly across like very big stores that we have, that becomes very expensive very quick. But in saying that, we do have certain capabilities in that aspect. So like there's certain things that sort of like, I think we call it like touch points. So we can track customers as they come through touch points. But particularly in Australia, that on top of the expensiveness behind it, there's also a huge factor on sort of the customer data side. So we have a lot of legislation in place that is there to protect customers' privacy. And so without people giving informed consent around a lot of these issues, then the actual trackability of that is something that's very problematic.
Yeah, definitely. And I've seen some organizations getting customers to download an app and for them to sort of consent into some linking through the app, and then they can use that in the store and kind of like that helps bridge the gap. But there's definitely protections to be considered there. We have another question around loyalty. So maybe this would be a good point to talk about maybe the churn mitigation side if you want, or we can go into how you guys think about loyalty and some of the work that you've done there. Up to you.
Yeah, I mean, so we can certainly talk about churn mitigation. But yeah, so loyalty, so from like, I'll think of it in two different things at the moment. So loyalty for CRG is at a very different sort of scale to what it is in David Jones at the moment. So if we just think about CRG, something around the 80% of all transactions that occur are loyalty transactions. So they're people who are actively engaged with the brand and have a loyalty account, which, like, yeah, again, when I first started, that was just phenomenal. I didn't realize that we had so many loyalists to the brand, which, yeah, so huge win for that. In terms of, I guess, the other facets to that, because you've got such a large base of your customers who are loyalty customers, one of the key reasons why we went through the whole churn mitigation process is because if you've got such a large base, the worst thing you want to have is to have that sort of slowly deteriorate over time because people are churning. And so that's why we went through the churn mitigation process to try and understand, well, what are the key levers that we can drive to mitigate that churn, and how can we implement those in as seamless a way as possible. So, for instance, if, like, at the moment, what we're sort of built out is this likelihood to churn model based on a whole bunch of different parameters, everything from sort of like what the customer is purchasing, the last time they purchased it, the average spend that they have, where they spent it, their age, their the other key demographics. All of these things can ladder up to a likelihood to churn for that customer. When that threshold starts to dip below a certain key threshold, then what you can actually have happen in the background is some sort of automated task that can either be sent out as an offer, like, oh, here's $5 to come and spend in our stores, or we know that you like this. How about you try maybe purchasing this? You can even optimize that component to be as effective as possible for that customer, knowing that they're a likely to churn customer. And so, like, all of these different key aspects is all about trying to maintain your loyalty base, so that it doesn't have any attrition over time, so that you can actually focus on sort of growing that customer base without any worries of it.
That's great, man. Awesome approach. And I think that's an awesome place to end on as well. Awesome note. Can't believe how quickly the hour went past. Mate, thank you so much for giving us such a deep understanding of the world of data science and in retail. It's fascinating. Really impressed with the work that you guys are doing and the amount of ground that you've been able to cover, not only in a short time, but during the pandemic as well. It's been awesome. So thanks so much for sharing your journey, your perspective, your insights. It's been fantastic.
No worries. Well, yeah, thanks for having me on board, Philip.
And thank you so much to everyone who joined live. Especially, I want to give a shout out to Minal, Andy, Tony, Ryan, Jason, Wayne, Emily, Shems, Caleb, Rob, Dasa. Really, really great questions. So thank you so much for participating. Thanks to everyone who is active on the chat, bringing questions. And I hope that you found this session really insightful, like I did. I'm going to tell you, we are also running our Advancing AI series, which runs on Tuesdays. It generally has been a Tuesday morning session. The next one coming on Tuesday next week, that is, it's going to be a lunchtime session, and we have Lachlan Wallace, who's the Chief Data Officer from Woodside Petroleum. They're based in Perth. So it'll be a morning session for WA and a lunchtime session for the East Coast. Join us there if you can, and then come back for more Data Futurology episodes. We will be releasing this on the podcast in the coming weeks, and also keep an eye on it on our YouTube channel. Thanks so much to everyone who joined today. And Aaron, thank you so much again, mate. That was fantastic.
Anytime. Cheers, bud.
Have a great day, everyone. See ya. That brings this episode to conclusion. Thank you so much for listening. Please find us on datafuturology.com or on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, or Instagram as Data Futurology. Also go to datafuturology.com/podcast to find the show notes for this and any other episodes. If you like this episode, it would mean a lot to us if you could leave us a review wherever you listen to our podcast. I hope you enjoyed this episode and that it was helpful and valuable for you. Thanks again, and see you next time.